but people don't know that yet because it's been such a gradual change. Yeah, I think I'm coming down with something as well, but I won't
Mm,
know until tomorrow, maybe over the weekend. But
mm,
yeah, I think we're live now. And welcome back, everyone. We're in episode 2 today, where I'm here with Tom Takigayama, and we're going to be talking about how he's transitioned from a director level role at JustWorks over to a very senior IC role and all the thinking behind that. Because to me, that's a very unique situation. I haven't really seen that happen very often within the same organization. So definitely want to talk more about that. But first of all, I want to also thank everyone who's donated to Tiffany's GoFundMe to help her rebuild her home after losing it in the fire in Altadena, California. It's been such a tragic situation for many folks, and we've been able to raise over $4,000 in the last 3 days alone. So it's just I feel deep amount of gratefulness to everyone in the design field who's really come together to help us raise this money. So thank you everyone who's donated. And if you haven't donated yet, please check out the QR code in the bottom right or the link in the comment section to put in a donation. We have a suggested amount of $25, but any more, any less, we're totally fine with it. We're just so grateful if you can spare any money at all. I know it's been such a hard time for everyone in the field in tech, really, with all the layoffs and everything. So just seeing the money come in, it means so much to us. So thank you everyone. Please reach out to me afterwards. I can thank you personally. So with that, Tom, could you tell us a bit about yourself, what you've been working on? I know we chatted like a while back, back when I was interviewing for JustWorks, and it's one of my regrets in my career actually that I didn't get to work with you folks because I genuinely really liked everyone I spoke to, like you and Sabrina and even William, the recruiter. I was like, oh, you folks like are really solid. The whole process was just so normal compared to the other processes out there. So yeah, that definitely stuck with me, even though it's been several years now. So Tom, tell us about what you've been up to.
yeah. Well, hello, live stream. My name is Tom Takigayama. I'm a principal experience designer at JustWorks. I've been in the design industry for over 2 decades. Started off in graphic design. Graduated during one of the earlier recessions, in 2001, 2002. And started my career in graphic design and advertisement, and did that for a number of years, and then was actually laid off from an advertising job during the second recession, which was like 2008, after the housing crash. And that's really when I started to kind of reevaluate, what I'm good at, what gives me joy, what I'm passionate about. And I kind of was very lucky enough to be introduced to web design and got a job at Ralph Lauren doing their e-commerce website, a lot of Flash websites and marketing sites. But that was really my introduction into digital design. And then from there, I worked at a number of startups, including like Guild Group, and then Etsy. And then I've been at JustWorks for it'll be this year it'll be 10 years, which is kind of wild to think about. But yeah, at JustWorks, I joined as a senior IC, and then there was a need for someone to manage the product design team, so I stepped up to do that. Grew the product design team and took the company from like a startup to a scale up. And then during the pandemic, I just burned out, honestly, and I wanted to step down and return to being an IC. And so I kind of I call it pendulum swinging, which I got from I think Charity Major's engineering leader, between maker and manager throughout my career at JustWorks.
That's really awesome. Can you tell us a bit about what you're currently working on at JustWorks?
Yeah. So I think you know, my first, I officially became a principal product experience designer about 6 months ago. And the first, I'd say, a few months were, I was just trying to understand what the role actually entailed. And, and I wanted to like jump in and like make a impact right away. But I think that what's challenging is that like you can't just like jump in and start doing things and making an impact. You kind of have to like assess and see, and understand where there's opportunities and see where there's like Jay, the VP of product design, or VP of experience design at JustWorks, he says like, find where there's a design shaped hole, and like we can kind of help the organization through the use of like design methodologies and design practices. And so I've been, for the first few months, I was kind of just talking to a lot of people, getting involved in a few different things and a lot of different conversations. Um, but it was just almost like research and discovery. Kind of, I alluded to, if I were to start a startup, I would first just like talk to a bunch of customers if I knew who my was, and start to understand them. And then more recently, I've been getting involved in kind of the design team initiative of creating a new model for JustWorks. And, um, that's like the primary thing I've been working on more recently. And then looking out further ahead, we're looking to see like where else in the company can we start to use design to kind of bring more business value. So hopefully that part I could talk about in the future.
Could you talk a bit about what is the shape of the design shape hole that Jay was alluding to?
Yeah, I think that the at JustWorks we have like a core business that's like really solid, uh, and when I stepped down from head of product design, I joined a like incubator type of thing on the international team, and on the international team we grew that initiative, and in addition to that, there was like been two other like incubated initiatives, and they both are starting to mature, but because they were like incubated, they're almost like separate from the main one, and which was the I think the right call to do it that way, because you kind of need to give it space to grow, and the velocity is very different. So I think the design shape hole that Jay is talking about is really that there's a need to kind of bring all of that back together, and the primary thing that is needed is a coherent and consistent customer experience, to tie them all together. And I think that as businesses tend to business, and they're very
Yeah.
opportunity focused, and they're like, okay, I got here's something that we can go after. Here's something we can go after. But oftentimes, even at a place like JustWorks, who's very customer focused, it can kind of get lost that like we have to actually, take a step back and think about how can we bring it all together, and really achieve a almost like a replatforming to make it
Mhm.
better for the customers. So I think that's the design shaped hole that Jay was talking about.
I see. Thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting that you're expanding to international markets and that JustWorks sees it as more of a design opportunity to tie in the user experience for the customer end to end. I know you mentioned earlier about your burnout and how that led you to becoming more of an IC. Can you talk a bit more about that? Because I've always I've seen quite a few folks burn out, but I've never seen anyone burn out and decide to go into IC work as a result.
Oh, I'm curious to see what other people do. I guess it just, well, for me, I think that as being a manager at like a fast growing company, has a lot of benefits, because you get to grow with the company, you get to learn a lot. But every few months, it's like a different company, and I felt like I had to um, almost like break myself apart and put myself back together to to kind of grow with what the company needs. Like there's like in like McKinsey articles, there's probably like four different phases of a company, but even within those four different phases, there's like like micro phases, and each one of those requires a different type of design leader, in my opinion. And so each time I felt like I had to learn and relearn things, and I think that I took a lot of lessons very like to heart, and it was hard for me to kind of let go of those things. And so I just became burned out because one, I was getting further away from what I felt like was tangible impact. When you're in a leadership position, your impact is like a lot wider, but it doesn't feel as deep, or it doesn't feel as visceral or fast. And
Yeah.
so I really missed that part. And I reported into the SVP of product. And so again, I felt like I didn't have like someone to turn to like this, to brainstorm different things, or like have like share different ideas from a design perspective. And I felt like I was often trying to explain the design perspective more than I was actually brainstorming and like living in kind of that mentality. So that was really challenging. And I just, yeah, I decided to take a break because I, yeah, I felt like what was needed for the next phase of design leader at JustWorks was, most likely a VP of design, and I didn't feel like I had it in me to grow again and grow that fast again. And so for me, the decision was easy because I felt like I don't want to, I don't want to do that to my team, and I feel like I don't want to show up as like I want to show up as the best version of myself. And when I looked at that, I kind of turned to my values, and I thought like, okay, what I'm passionate about actually like being in the work, about making tangible impact. And so that's kind of what I returned to doing. Unfortunately, the international opportunity was like there for me to be able to switch.
That's amazing because I feel like most folks would gravitate toward that opportunity or that vacuum of power and seize it if possible. I hope you don't mind sharing, like, which phase of this change was the most difficult for you as you've had to adapt to the different growth stages of the company.
Yeah. I mean, this is for me personally, the hardest stage was going from a manager of designers to like, I would say, leading a design team where I was managing managers. I had, like, I know a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome, but I definitely felt that a lot because I'm like, like I question like, am I qualified to lead managers? Because I've only been a manager for a few years, um, and I think that was the hardest part because one, I think if you don't have like at least some confidence in what you're doing, then it definitely shows. And I know as a leader now that like I just it's now I know that it's a lot more important for me to remain authentic than to like do something that it says I'm supposed to do in a book. And um, I think managing managers was really the hardest time for me. And I think that part, I guess from a company perspective, it was kind of going from, I don't know, we started exceeding the 1,000+ employees. Um, and at that stage, it just became more difficult for me.
How big was the design team at that point when you were starting to manage other managers?
I think it was around like 12 to 15.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is totally foreign to me because I've never managed managers before. I've only managed, a few designers at a time at most. And I don't even know what is the biggest difference between managing managers versus managing individual contributors. Like, what kind of muscles do you have to develop that's different?
Well, I think one thing that I thought one mistake that I made was thinking that managers require some different, like, is a totally different type of person, and you need to, manage them in a very different way. I actually uh, that was one of the lessons that I learned. I'd say that the like in my mind that they're not so different. Like designers need a bit of autonomy and direction and like clarity where you can provide it. I think that with the managers, the mistake I made was assuming that like they didn't need certain things because they're managers. Like, oh, they understand that like there might not be as much clarity, or that right now I'm trying to make sense of what's happening and what's being talked about, and trying to like reverse engineer that. And so I actually don't see them that much different. That like they would, but I think it was just more for me the way that I showed up with them. Like I didn't, yeah. Like I think that was the biggest like lesson that I took on.
Thank you for sharing that because that was my assumption as well that it would be radically different when perhaps that's just an assumption on my part. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do a quick donation update. Anonymous donated $25. Thank you so much, folks. If you haven't donated yet, please hit the donation button or QR code. I left a link in the comments. Unfortunately, LinkedIn Live strips out all the linking capabilities, so you have to copy and paste it so that people can't spam it. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Anonymous, please reach out to me afterwards. I want to thank you personally. I have no idea who you are, so yeah, Tom. I feel like most folks I've seen who have switched from managerial duties to ICs, a lot of them have been forced to due to the market. Like there are far fewer managerial roles out there, and if they want to be employed, they have to go for one of those like lead or senior roles and kind of get back on the saddle. And I haven't really seen a whole lot of folks who are doing this willingly within the organization. And I think part of it has to do with the career trajectory of most companies because for an IC, you kind of hit a ceiling at some point. Most companies, you'll be lucky to have a lead level. And if there's a staff and principal level, that's definitely the highest. There's no line from say a principal level into
Mhm.
a VP level up down the line, or they hit a ceiling in terms of compensation.
Mhm.
What was your thoughts around that as you navigated this process?
I mean, I think, I empathize so much with people who, are like struggling to find, a job, and or having to take different types of roles that than they were trying to achieve. Um, my my perspective on this is that and I actually gave a talk about this at Leading Design London a few months ago, but like the I don't think career progression is linear. I actually think that it should be more fluid, and like that's kind of the tenet that I follow, where it's okay if like you try to become a manager and you didn't, and then you're actually returning back to being IC. And there's definitely power in going back and forth. uh, I do think that um, like if you become a principal level and eventually you want to become a VP, that like that path is there for you. It just may not be like the next step. Like who for myself, maybe one day I'll want to either start my own company or uh, try to become a VP of design somewhere. I know that I'm not going to be able to just go from principal designer and then jump to a VP position, although I'm sure that people have done that. I'd probably have to like go back a little bit, and then like work my way up, or like show that. But I think it's all like really contextually dependent on uh, what the opportunities call for. Um, I guess the main thing I'm trying to say is that like if you only look at what you want to achieve at the end, then you kind of miss the great part of the journey. And like
Yeah.
I almost like that's what I'm trying to evangelize, which is like if people do have to go back to being an IC, try to see it as an opportunity, not like something that you're being forced to do, because like there's different types of growth. And um, like at my time at JustWorks, I unofficially became an IC where I joined the international initiative, but then that initiative became a strategic initiative, and we needed to, it was rapidly growing, so I need to expand a design team again. And so I kind of, because of the context, I had to switch back into being a manager. And I could have approached it to be like, oh man, like this, this sucks. I'm going to go look for another job just so I can stay in IC. I actually took it as like an opportunity to like take some stuff that I learned from going back to being an IC and how I built up the empathy, and then try being a different type of manager this time. And I took it as an opportunity to experiment and try a different way of leadership, and which was a lot which was a lot healthier for me because I wasn't like burning out as much. But I guess like what I'm trying to say is just that I think careers are more fluid, and it's not just the career ladder that you need to go up. And so I hope people can kind of see that and just see that right now, maybe they're in a position where they want to, it may not be what they thought it would be, but there's always like things that you can learn from it. And like, that doesn't mean you're going to be stuck there forever. And yeah, I just hope people see that it's not as like rigid.
I really appreciate that perspective because I think from the recruiting side, oftentimes we're trying to tell this story about somebody, like some designer's career, and we're kind of expecting this story to be some kind of upward trajectory always as they go from one company to another. And I've heard, recruiters or hiring managers make assumptions about people's careers, like, well, they took a down level here. What happened? Or this stint at this company was very short. What happened there? They're trying to figure out and maybe point to some kind of weakness or failing on the designer's side when it can be extremely complex. And that you're right, careers are not a, it's not just a singular or linear path, but actually quite ambiguous at times and can be complex. You're right. I love that. Folks, also in the comment section, feel free to put in your questions where we can definitely answer them live because all of this is live stream. So uh, we welcome any questions for Tom, for me. We can definitely chat about it. It's supposed to be fun and low key. And as always, please donate. I'm going to include the link in the comments as well. Would really appreciate any dollars coming in. Thank you so much. Tom, I wonder, did you have like a framework for making these kind of decisions? Because it feels like to many designers, it's a pretty big decision to go from an IC to managerial level or vice versa. And that's a question that I get asked quite often, even though I'm really not the right person to answer this, which is, should I go into a managerial role? Or they say, well, I'm in a managerial role now, but I'm not enjoying myself. Should I move back or continue down this way? What's the right thing to do? And I've always struggled with trying to answer that.
Yeah, I don't have like a set framework, but what I do often is to turn to my values. Like what what is it that I value? When I made the decision to step down, I one, I cared about the design team, and I didn't want to like force them to go through the growing pains as for growing pains as a leader again. And two, I care about like craft and being in the work. And so like that really led me to like, okay, I see that there needs to be a change now. What are the opportunities that now align with my values? And I do think that like everyone's values is different. So like almost stack ranking which ones are the most important to you um, will like help guide the decisions that you need to make. And sometimes it's financial, and like that's totally okay. So I feel privileged that I don't have to have that be the first thing for me.
Hmm.
And so like it's really about like what are the things that you value the most, and then you can kind of start to see which opportunities might exist based on that. I know that you had Kat Smalls on before, and she was saying that like the different, like depending on what the company needs, like you kind of like adjust yourself. And I agree with that, because sometimes you'll explore what your values are, and then have a list of like what it is that you want to make your decisions on. And sometimes that's achievable in the company, sometimes that's not. And so sometimes you have to like look outside of it, and and beyond that, sometimes it's not even the right roles. I know, Hang, you were thinking about like maybe switching to PM at one point, like product manager at one point.
Yeah. I,
And so I do think that like the framework I use is like turn to your values and then use those values to base it on like the base your decisions on those values.
I should have done that.
Been a PM?
No, no, like turn to my values and try to figure that out because I've been way too fluid on that end, unfortunately. So, yeah. Did you work with Kat Small at Etsy?
I did not, but she joined the Etsy payments team, which I was at for a while. We didn't have an overlap, but she worked with a lot of people that I knew, and so we've connected throughout the years, and yeah, she's great. Like, but yeah, we didn't get the opportunity to work directly with each other.
Yeah. I feel like the design community is so small that it's all the same few folks at certain levels, and you're just kind of like, oh, you all know each other. You probably have worked together, same overlap or company. So it's almost surprising you haven't worked with someone sometimes.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so you haven't had to really look for a job at the director level or at the principal or staff level, like the super senior level.
Yeah.
But if you were to, God forbid, if you were to, like, how would you navigate this process differently than when you were at a senior level? Like, how would you really emphasize the fact that you are now a principal or super senior IC level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess it's the way I would approach it is to really understand the company at a core level more than the opportunity, because like I actually don't know what it would be like to apply for principal level jobs. That's something I'll probably like learn and probably fail at for a while. Um, but what I care about the most is like what type of environment and like business I'd be joining. Because like I think at the principal level, it's less about like uh, a feature or a product. It's more about like the company itself and like what impact you can make on it. And so I think I would start there where I would do a lot of research on which types of companies I would be drawn to and what the opportunities might be, and then use that research to kind of like validate the opportunities that they actually have. It's like, do they actually know what a principal designer is going to do? Do they actually want a principal designer? So I think that's where I would kind of turn to. But all that is like incredibly privileged to be able to be like, oh, I'm gonna like take my time and research it. If I got laid off tomorrow, then I'd probably go back to my roots and join a startup.
I see. Would you be okay going into maybe a more granular aspect of how you would identify these companies or research them to see if they're ready for a principal level designer? Because I feel like that's a really hard thing to do because oftentimes you see that title and you're just like, okay, that's a staff level title. I'm gonna go for it. I was a staff level or a principal level. Go for it. And it takes a while to identify that, especially if you're not speaking to them just yet. So, what is your process to figure that out before you apply?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a lot of internet sleuthing, and also like using my network and reaching out to people. I feel like the design community, like you said, is small and very open. And so if I might be like, hey, has anyone worked at this so and so company, or does someone know of someone who has worked at this company? That would be one way I would approach it. The other ways would be like just searching for past articles, past talks, see if there's like product people who've given talks or engineering people who's given talks, because like if they mention like a design partner in their talk, then you're like, okay, well, at least they're on a public forum they're talking about it, so that must mean there's, like some goodness there. So I would just, yeah, I would find ways to like kind of come at it from the side and understand it. And of course, if there is a job description, I think analyzing that is really like the key thing, because it's like, is it very specific at what the role is asking for, or is it more generic?
Do you feel like there's a minimum company or design team size where the super senior, like staff principal level, becomes viable versus non-viable?
It's a good question. I think it depends on the type of super senior designer that you're looking for. I'd say that like an official, like principal level designer with staff designers and like senior designers and like that, I feel like has to be a large, like a good sized design team, at least like
Yeah.
I don't know, 20 or 30 at a minimum. But I think it depends on the context of the company and the culture. Like if there is something that um, like if you're in an earlier stage startup that actually sees the value of like having someone that they're that early on and bringing people together, then that would be great. But it's kind of rare, because I think at earlier stage companies, the design managers and the directors are kind of the ones who are supposed to do all of it at once.
Yeah. I get it. Uh, are you able to talk about JustWorks leveling when it comes to staff and principal? If you're not able to, could we talk a bit about like how it's leveled generally? How you might see the difference between staff versus principal and also versus lead? Because to me, I feel like it's pretty easy to differentiate between junior and senior and even senior and
Mhm.
lead. Between like lead and staff and principal, it becomes much more ambiguous.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I could talk about it generally. And, this is a lot of the credit might go to Jay, who came in with a lot of experience and with like leveling. In general, I think the difference between like a principal and a staff level is like a principal level, or sorry, a staff level would be someone who is um, connecting, and partnering with other staff level designers to connect certain like areas of the platform, or like areas of the business, um, and they're really going cross cutting. And I think that a principal level is, definitely doing the cross cutting as well, but is thinking one level higher and almost thinking about like a company level strategy of how things are coming to play, and kind of connecting the strategic layer to those initiatives. And then on top of that, think projecting out a little bit further ahead and kind of seeing where, like, to use the words from this earlier, like where the design shape hole might be. So
Hmm.
understanding like, okay, where are the opportunities that we can go, and seeing where the company wants to go to. How do we actually show the business that, like, okay, if you actually invested more in design here, or not even just design, but if you invested more like into here, like we could save the company money, or like make this experience so much better for inside the company. So I think the difference is really like one thinking one level higher, and then also projecting out a little bit further out.
I get it. I feel like there are a lot of senior designers out there and lead level designers, and I would include myself as one of them, who feels like, I'm not saying this is totally an accurate feeling, but some of us have felt like we've been helping drive the strategy of the feature or the product that we're building. And we're connecting to the company's overarching business or underlying business. And at the same time, it doesn't feel like the work is being recognized, or it
Mm.
doesn't feel like they're willing to promote us to, say, the staff or principal level, which is what you mentioned about how they're connecting the business to the design work itself, or they're driving or creating new business strategies overall. And I kind of want to ask, like, how, when somebody finds up in that situation, how should they navigate this? Like, part of it, I assume, is, trying to understand, like, are they truly doing that, or do they just think they're doing that? And if they actually are doing it, what's the best way to help the business realize that, you are now growing into a level that even if they don't have a leveling guide for this, like at a staff principal level, that you should be properly compensated or they should create this role for you.
Yeah. So the I think there's like two parts to that. The
Yeah, I do. I screw up these questions all the time. Like,
I think the second part, doing starting with like recency is um like how do you establish a role when that role doesn't exist? And
yeah,
I think at JustWorks, that was basically my whole time at JustWorks. I came in as a senior designer. There was no staff level designer, so I like advocated for it, and basically was the first staff designer, and then the first like design director, and then like advocating for VP of design. And I think like there was no like one way of doing it. I do think it's if I feel like you're gonna ask me for a framework. So if I were to put it into a framework, it would be like first understand where the company's at,
yeah,
because the way I like to think about it is like the company has like like a brain, but it also has like a heart. And like the brain side is going to be like, okay, show me the numbers. Like, why do you need to do, like what's the reason you need to like have this level, and what's the impact that they're going to do? And for that, you have to turn to like things that have happened in the past or like other companies. But there are times that that's not even enough. And so sometimes you just, um, there was a design director named Christy Wedge who worked at JustWorks. She became the head of product design after I stepped down. She would often say this thing about like make them feel the pain, which is like which I would say is make the problem visceral, or like make him understand the challenges. And
yeah,
I've definitely taken that to heart. And so when there was a need for a VP of design, like I could have spent so much energy like advocating for it and being like, this is what needs to happen. Here's these companies and their growth trajectories, and like they have a like I could have spent time doing that, but I didn't. One, because I was like, I care, but I care about my mental health more than the companies. So I just like I let it play out. You kind of like need to let things play out sometimes. And so I think this is just a way to this is what I'm trying to say is that sometimes you can influence these things and sometimes you can't. I think step one is determining if you can or not, because the hardest thing to do is change people's mindsets. And like sometimes you have advocates and people who will like help you, but sometimes like you won't. And so I think it's a skill to know when to invest in it and when to not. um yeah, I know that sounds a little bit like ambiguous, but
no, this is more than I hoped for. Honestly, like this is way more than I hoped for. So I really appreciate your being so authentic and sharing all this information. We got two more donations coming in from Maria Torres and Kartik Gupta. Thank you so much, you two, for donating. Folks, again, the QR code's on the bottom right, and also we have the link in the comment section if you're able to donate the suggested amount, $25 or more or less. We greatly appreciate it. We're just trying to help Tiffany get back on her feet after losing her home, her house, and it's just such a devastating time for a lot of folks in the LA area and Altadena, which gets very little media attention. It's super tragic. So every dollar counts. Thank you so much, everyone who have donated. Tom, I kind of want to ask this. I know it's totally an unfair question, but I never I've never gotten the insider view of how a company decides to hire a VP of design when there wasn't one before. And I imagine it's kind of like a long process. It doesn't just happen overnight. But are you able to share some kind of information around like how the story of how this happened and like what was the ultimate trigger point where it's like, okay, we're gonna start hiring a VP tomorrow?
yeah, i I don't know what I'm able to share or not, so I'll just share it. um I guess like like Christy took over for as head of product design for a few years, and then and then she left the company. So there was a void. We were very lucky that we were started reporting into the SVP of engineering, Eugen.
Oh,
He was a great design advocate. Like he just, and I will forever like be grateful for what he did for the design team, which is like prevent the design team from being decentralized, which is what was happening. I don't know if I'm able to. It doesn't matter. But yeah,
no, I never mind. I shouldn't say that. I vaguely remember some things. But anyway, go ahead.
but Eugen, yeah. So the design managers reported to Eugen for a while. Um, since he was a great design advocate, I guess we were talking, and he wanted to. I guess I forget how it came up, but uh, we turned to Peter Meerholz to help us for a while, and I think that it just became clear to the company that like what's needed is not like another design director. What's needed is like a VP of design, um, because if we're saying, the company is saying that like, we care about a customer experience and we want to make experience like a competitive advantage, then you kind of need a design, lead, like executive to come in to do that. And I think it was also a time where in the company's transition from being like, I would say going from like an adolescent to like an awkward teen where we're trying to act like a big company, but like we still have some things that we're figuring out. Um, and so really it was like just making it like showing that what's really needed to bring the design team together is a VP of design. And I guess beyond that, there's probably some like closed doors or different conversations that happen at the executive level that I'm probably not aware of.
Would you be able to talk about the thinking behind why a company needs a VP of design versus having just another director or head of design? Like, what is the difference between needing it and being able to get away without having a VP of design for a while?
Yeah. Well, this will be purely like my interpretation and my like assumptions. Um, but I mean, for one, we were hiring a bunch of different VP level people, and like general managers. There's like a SVP of product, SVP of engineering, and like if we're really going to be a trifecta of like like product, engineering and design all like working together, there just felt like a major imbalance of that, um, and so I think that was like one of the values is like just bringing someone that can like bring a perspective that can you know I'm sure there's like director level people who can talk to executives and whatnot, but like we were really looking for people who've been there before. And like for myself, I wasn't someone who's like been at a bunch of different companies and work with different types of executives and have and grown mature design teams at multiple places. And I feel like most directors don't have that. Maybe they have like one or two places, but we're really looking for like someone really, really experienced. For that, it's like a VP level person is like required and needed. Um, and I would say like a true VP, like I think some people have VP in the title but aren't actually like truly a VP. Uh,
Yeah. Same with directors.
Same with directors.
Yeah.
I think I was that for a while, but anyway, um, yeah, I think. Sorry, what was the question again?
I totally forgot, but oh no, I remember. What was the impetus for? I don't want to ask about JustWorks because I feel like I'm prying way too deep at this point, but I'm kind of curious, like when companies decide they want to hire a VP as opposed to just have continue to having a director level. design as a design leader, how do they make that decision between hiring VP tomorrow versus let's keep
Yeah.
doing what we're doing?
Yeah, I think it's just like it from a company's perspective. It's like they want to change. They want
Yeah,
to change to happen, and I think that the the great thing about JustWorks is that we're always iterating. We're always like trying to improve, and um, like we always want to make changes and have impact. And so I think that the the company kind of knew that they needed to be a change. And luckily the executives at the company value design so much that they're like, okay, a we need an executive to come to help like the design team and be a representative for the design team. And so I think it's what goes into a company like needing deciding that they need a VP of design is like usually has to do with like strategy, and like they make a decision and they actually see it that they can't achieve it without it. And I think that's for me is like just kind of letting the design side of things um like not letting the design things like kind of stagnate, and like seeing how it evolves without a design leader. I think was probably a way to help the company see that they needed one.
I see. Make the challenges visceral or make the pain very apparent.
Yeah.
Got two more donations from Audrey B and Lester G. Thank you folks so much. We're only less than $250 away from $20,000, which is we're at 76%. So that's pretty great. Thank you everyone. If you haven't hit the donation button yet, please do. We appreciate every dollar. It's gonna be really meaningful to Tiffany and her family. Tom, I kind of want to ask about craft because there's been a lot of talk lately, both on the recruiting side and also among designers about the importance of craft and how we're kind of losing that in a way in recent years.
Mhm.
And it feels like, at least in the job descriptions I've seen, there's like this really big emphasis on we're looking for people with craft, high bar for visual design and delight, etc. And that's kind of how they're assigning these designers to be like lead or staff level. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you feel like craft is still driving your set of tools, or is it more or is it something else?
Yeah, I think I question what craft means to different people, because
Yeah,
I feel like it could mean so many different things. Like to me, it's about like to me I don't know if this is exactly right, but I see craft more as like craftsmanship. Like it's about like how it functions and the level of like quality it goes into it. And I think quality is it can vary so many different places. A place like JustWorks, it's quality is like compliance, right? It's like trust. It's like earning people's trust and maintaining it. That's very different than like I don't know, maybe during my guilt group days, quality was more about how slick it is, and like and even in the customer's eyes, it's probably about the actual products that we were selling. Like I feel like it varies tremendously. Since you brought up like job descriptions that have craft in it, I kind of question like what is it that they mean by craft? Is it like
yeah,
a level of visual design refinement that is so good that it feels like is that what they mean by craft, which is okay. Like
yeah.
some people have really good have strengths in that, or that company values in that, or is it a level deeper where it's not just about you know like craft could be substituted with like intuitive user experience, and like just being able to use the product, and it just like produces delight. So I question like what they mean by craft. For me, I see craft as just like the practice of design, and like almost the joy of continuing to do the design. And like the, I I always feel incredibly like fortunate and privileged, um, because I get to think about design as like every problem I encounter, I see as an opportunity, and I'm like, okay, you know, well, this isn't the best situation I'm in, but let me find the opportunity. And for me, it's like, how can I always bring like design thinking and not design thinking the like process, but like the design methodology and the designer's mentality to a problem. And I love working with people to almost turn them into designers and be like, look, let's just think about let's think about the problem in a different way, before we come up with a solution. And so for me, craft is just about the methodologies and the practice of it, and like almost like having joy in doing the thing, because like that kind of comes out in the actual end product.
It's really interesting, and I think you're totally right because there's so many different definitions of craft, and I think one of my favorite one is just kind of how people talk about craft similar to craft works. So, for example, like Steve Jobs' autobiography, where he talks about the importance of like making a cabinet, making sure that
Mhm.
even though you can't see certain aspects of the cabinet, it's, installed to the side of the wall or it's inside or somewhere,
Right.
you're doing your best to make sure that it's of the same quality as you would put up front because all this matters. And I think you're right also that a lot of times with recruiters, design recruiters especially, and founders, non-design founders, they tend to see craft as more like visual design. And then if you're like working at a company like say Instagram or TikTok, I feel like it's more about prototyping in a way. It's like, can you build the
Mhm.
thing? Because you can't really like I think for I might be wrong on this, but I feel like with products like JustWorks, you can do a lot of research and a lot of prototyping to well, you can do a lot of research to figure out if you should build something, if it's going to have engagement or people going to pay for it without having to write a single line of code. And then when you talk about micro interactions, which is like driving a lot of the social media apps out there, driving engagement, it's like how do you test to see if people are if they could use this emoji, it would create the kind of engagement you're looking for. Like how do you research that, right? So you kind of have to write out some code or like use some kind of a prototyping tool to see how people engage with this micro interaction you're designing. But I think my favorite definition of craft so far, I'm still like toying with it because the way people described it wasn't perfect, and I'm trying to like get to the essence of it. But to me, it's like difference between like a one Michelin star restaurant and a three Michelin star restaurant. And I would say in both cases, the food is like pretty equivalent. Like I wouldn't be able to tell a difference between the two restaurants. Like if I didn't see the surrounding, if I didn't see the guide, you told me, you put two plates of food in front of me, blindfolded me, and I ate both, and I'd be like, they're both excellent food, and they're both probably Michelin star level food, but I wouldn't be able to say this is 1 star versus 3 star. And I think if you go into a 3 star Michelin restaurant, you start to pick up certain things where it's so extra. Like they do so much more. They're so considerate of your every single need. It's not just a gastronomical experience, but almost visual and
Mhm.
experiential. And everything comes together, the service, the wait staff, the lighting, just you booking the restaurant itself, it's like on a different level. At least that's how I experienced it. And I think to me, that's like craft. Like it's not just how it looks, but
Mhm.
everything is so extra. Like you don't just give them 100%, you give them 130% just because you can. And you're just like constantly striving, working your ass off, kind of like that show, The Bear,
Mhm.
where the guy's just like, he's like, I'm just gonna do a new menu every single day. And they're just like, no, are you nuts? Like you can't there's no there's no way to do this. And he's like, no, I'm gonna do that. And I feel like that's the level of craft that I think some companies are talking about. And it's absolutely insane. But that's
Mhm.
where we are right now in this market.
Wow. Well, I don't think I can believe you until you take me to a Michelin, 3-star Michelin restaurant. Or is it 1 star? Which one's the better one?
3 stars.
Three
I
stars.
think, yeah, I think that's the highest
Okay.
you can get, and it takes like a long time to get there. Like if you go to Singapore, there are a bunch of these hawker markets
Hmm.
where they can get a single Michelin star, and it's crazy because you're paying like $7 for some kind of like curry soup, like curry laksa soup, and you're like, this is great, right? And but they'll never get like 2 or 3 Michelin stars because that's like saved for
For like the
this,
top. Yeah.
yeah, the crazy restaurants where you're
We should
spending
do
like
some
thousands.
research. I think we need to validate this somehow. Like
Yeah,
they're going to some 3-star Michelin.
someday, Tom,
Yeah,
someday,
someday.
when one of us become the SVP somewhere.
Hmm. Because that's what SVPs do, right? They just eat at Michelin star restaurants all
Yeah,
the
we could ask Jay to take it to the Michelin star restaurant.
time. In our next one-on-one, I'll ask him.
Okay.
But I love that definition though. There is something kind of there, about like how over you. I mean, you use the word extra, but it's kind of like almost like how thoughtful and like all-consuming the experience is.
I'm just making stuff up. I assume that's what people mean because it goes so far beyond just the visual aspects. But
Yeah,
we're almost at time now. I so enjoyed this conversation. I learned so much, and I felt like I made you break some NDAs probably along the way. But thank you everyone for tuning in and for your donations. We still have some time, so please click on the QR. Sorry, not QR. Click on the link or scan the QR code in the bottom right to donate to Tiffany's family after they've lost their home in the fires in Altadena, California. So please, everyone, thank you so much. Tom, I just want to thank you again. I know you're super busy. You've got so much work to do. It's also a Friday afternoon, Friday evening almost, and you're taking the time to chat with me for a good call. So I really appreciate you. Hope we keep chatting, and thank you so much.
yeah. Thanks for having me.
No, it's great. I've had fun. We should definitely catch up more. But yeah, I'll see you around, man.
All right. Have
All
a
right.
good
Take
weekend.
care. You too.